Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Dump. Troy Hutchinson gripped the steering wheel tighter as his phone buzzed against the dashboard. The construction site had been a nightmare today. Another delay. Another contractor tried to shortchange him. At 34, Troy had built his demolition company from nothing, and he'd learned that showing weakness invited vultures. "Daddy." Emma's voice crackled through the speaker, small and confused. "Hey, sweetheart, how's Grandma Helen's house?" Troy softened his voice, the way he only did for his 6-year-old daughter. She was the one pure thing in his increasingly complicated world. "Daddy, I'm scared. Grandma took me to a big place with lots of trash, and she made me eat old bread. It tasted bad and had green stuff on it." Troy's blood chilled. "What? Emma, where are you exactly?" "I don't know. There are big trucks and mountains of garbage. Grandma said we had to come here because—" Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they only have boys." The line went dead. Troy stared at his phone, his mind racing. Helen Marsh, his mother-in-law, had never been warm toward him, but taking Emma to a dump? Making her eat moldy bread? And what the hell did they only have boys mean? He speed-dialed his wife, Rebecca. Straight to voicemail. 20 minutes later, Troy pulled into the driveway of the modest ranch house where Helen lived. His wife's BMW wasn't there. Emma came running out, her blonde hair disheveled, her Disney dress stained with something that smelled like rotting food. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms. Helen appeared in the doorway, her gray hair pulled back severely, her thin lips pressed into their perpetual frown. "You're early. Where's Rebecca?" Troy asked, not returning her greeting. "Working late. Again." Helen's tone carried an edge that made Troy's jaw clench. "Why did you take Emma to a dump?" Helen's eyes shifted. "I don't know what the child told you, but Mom made her eat rotten bread, Helen. At a dump." Troy's voice dropped to the dangerous quiet that his employees recognized as a warning. "Sometimes children need to learn that life isn't always pretty," Helen said, her chin raised defiantly. "The Marsh family has always understood sacrifice." "The Marsh family?" Troy repeated slowly. Rebecca had been a Castell before marriage. Helen had remarried after Rebecca's father died when she was young. Helen's face went pale. I just meant. "You meant what, Helen?" But she'd already retreated into the house, the door clicking shut with finality. Troy buckled Emma into her car seat, his mind churning. In the rearview mirror, he watched Helen's silhouette in the window, motionless as a sentinel. "Daddy, what does they only have boys mean?" Emma asked as they drove home. Troy met her eyes in the mirror. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out." Chapter 2, Digging Deeper. The house felt different when Troy carried Emma inside. Too quiet. Too clean. Rebecca's laptop was missing from the kitchen counter where she usually left it. Her favorite coffee mug, the one Emma had made her for Mother's Day, sat unused in the sink. Troy tucked Emma into bed with an extra story, then sat in his home office, staring at a framed photo on his desk. Rebecca at their wedding 7 years ago, radiant in white, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. Next to it, a smaller frame held Emma's first photo, tiny, red-faced, perfect. His phone buzzed. "Rebecca, sorry, big case. Working late at Miranda's. Don't wait up." Miranda Castell, Rebecca's sister. A successful therapist who'd never liked Troy, though she hid it better than Helen. Troy pulled out his laptop and began typing. Helen Marsh. The name felt foreign now. He'd known her as Helen Castell for the 6 years he'd dated Rebecca, then Helen Marsh for the year since she'd remarried that quiet widower, Frank. The search results were sparse. Frank Marsh had died 3 months ago. Troy remembered the funeral, remembered how Helen had seemed almost relieved rather than grieved. A small obituary mentioned Frank's previous marriage and children. Troy's finger hovered over the mouse. Frank Marsh had had 3 sons from his first marriage, all deceased. The oldest had died in Afghanistan. The other 2 in a car accident 5 years earlier. 3 sons, no daughters. Troy's breathing shallowed. He searched deeper, following genealogy sites and old newspaper articles. The Marsh family tree stretched back 4 generations in local records. Names and dates blurred together until a pattern emerged that made his stomach drop. Every Marsh male, for over a century, had produced only male children. Every single one. The phenomenon was so consistent that a local university had done a study in the 1980s, determining it was likely a genetic trait, possibly a chromosomal condition that prevented the conception or viability of female offspring. Troy's hands are shaking now. Emma was 6 years old. Emma was a girl. If Helen had really been thinking of Emma as part of the Marsh family line when she said they only have boys, then the front door opened. Rebecca's heels clicked across the hardwood. "Troy," she called softly. "You still up?" He closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. Rebecca stood by the refrigerator, still in her work clothes, a sharp navy suit that cost more than most people made in a week. Her law firm paid well, but not that well. "How was Miranda's?" he asked. Rebecca didn't meet his eyes. "Fine. You know how she gets. Needed a vent about her ex." She poured herself a glass of wine. "How was Emma?" "Interesting day. Your mother took her somewhere unusual." Rebecca's hand stilled on the wine glass. "What do you mean?" "A dump, Rebecca. Helen took our 6-year-old daughter to eat moldy bread at a dump." That's ridiculous. Mom wouldn't." "Emma called me, terrified. Said Helen told her they only have boys." "Ring any bells?" The color drained from Rebecca's face. "I know. I don't know what she meant." Troy stepped closer. "Don't you?" "Because I spent some time researching the Marsh family tonight. Fascinating genetics they have." Rebecca set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "Troy, you're scaring me." "Good," he said quietly. "Because I'm starting to get scared too. Scared about what other lies I might uncover if I keep digging." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Troy caught a flash of panic in her eyes before she turned the screen away. "I need a shower," she said, her voice strained. "We can talk tomorrow." She hurried toward the stairs, but Troy caught her arm, gently but firmly. "Rebecca." She turned, and for just a moment, he saw something in her face he'd never seen before. Guilt. Raw, desperate guilt. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," Troy replied. "The question is, who else do you love?" Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. Troy didn't sleep. He sat in his office until dawn, building a timeline that made his chest feel like it was caving in. Emma had been born 7 years and 2 months ago. Rebecca had gotten pregnant during their engagement, 3 months before the wedding, a happy surprise that had made them both giddy with joy. But now he remembered things differently. Rebecca's strange mood swings that spring. Her sudden interest in yoga classes that seemed to happen at odd hours. The way she'd been protective of her phone, claiming work was getting more demanding. He also remembered the week she'd gone to visit her college roommate in Portland. Girl time, she called it. Just need to clear my head before we become a family. Emma had been born exactly 38 weeks after Rebecca returned from Portland. Troy's phone rang at 6 a.m. An unknown number. "Mr. Hutchinson? This is Dr. Raymond Cross. I believe we need to talk." "Who is this?" "I was Frank Marsh's physician. I think you might want to know some things about his family's medical history. Things that might affect your daughter." Troy's grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of things?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour?" "Come alone." Dr. Cross was a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly when he handed Troy a manila envelope. Frank was a good man, Cross said as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. But he carried guilt about something until the day he died. About Helen. About what she was hiding. Troy opened the envelope. Inside were medical records, genetic test results, and a handwritten letter. Frank found out 3 months before he died. Cross continued. Helen had confessed everything to him during one of his cancer treatments. The guilt was eating her alive, especially after Frank's sons died, and she realized what the genetic testing revealed. Troy read Frank's letter, written in a careful, shaking hand. "To whoever finds this, my wife Helen made a terrible mistake 7 years ago. She helped her daughter deceive her husband about their child's paternity. The man Helen calls Curtis Brennan is the real father. I kept this secret because I love Helen, but I cannot die with this knowledge. The little girl deserves the truth, and the husband deserves justice. Helen planned to tell him the day Curtis comes back to town next month. She's been planning it for months, trying to find the courage. But I think the man deserves to know on his own terms. Frank Marsh. Troy's vision blurred. Curtis Brennan. The name hit him like a physical blow. Curtis had been Rebecca's law school study partner. He'd been at their wedding, charming, handsome, with an easy smile that had made Troy instinctively dislike him. Curtis had moved to Portland for work right after graduation, but he'd kept in touch with Rebecca. Always professional, always friendly. "There's more," Dr. Cross said gently. "Frank did some investigating before he died. Curtis is coming back to town permanently. He's bought a house 2 miles from yours. He's planning to start a practice here." Troy closed the envelope, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Helen doesn't know Frank wrote this letter," Cross added. "She thinks she still has time to decide how to tell you." "How long have you been sitting on this?" 2 weeks. Frank made me promise to wait until after his funeral arrangements were complete. He didn't want Helen to suffer more than necessary, even though— Cross trailed off. "Even though she deserves to suffer," Troy finished. Cross looked uncomfortable. Frank loved her. He wanted mercy for her. Troy stood, the envelope clutched in his fist. "Frank was a better man than me." That afternoon, Troy picked up Emma from school himself instead of letting Rebecca handle it. He studied his daughter's face as she chattered about her day. The shape of her nose, the color of her eyes, the way she gestured with her hands. He'd always thought she looked like Rebecca. Now he realized he'd been seeing what he wanted to see. "Daddy, you look sad," Emma said as they sat in the ice cream shop where they'd gone every Friday since she was old enough to walk. "Just thinking, sweetheart, about the bad bread at Grandma's house." Troy met her eyes. "Emma, do you remember anything else Grandma said at that place?" Emma scrunched her face in concentration. "She said something about a man named Curtis. She said he was coming home soon and that everything would be different." Troy's spoon clattered against his bowl. "Did I say something wrong?" Emma asked, her voice small. Troy forced a smile. "No, baby. You said everything exactly right." That night, Rebecca tried to initiate their usual Friday night routine. Wine, takeout, and a movie after Emma went to bed. But Troy couldn't focus on anything except the weight of the envelope hidden in his office safe. "You've been weird all day," Rebecca said during the movie. "Is this about what Mom did?" "Because I talked to her and—" "What did she say?" Rebecca hesitated. "She said she was trying to teach Emma about reality, about how hard life can be, by making her eat rotten food at a dump. She said Emma was being dramatic, that it was just stale bread and—" Troy turned off the TV. "Rebecca, I need you to tell me something. I need you to be completely honest." Her face went pale. "Okay, is Emma my daughter?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Tears began streaming down her face. "Troy, is she mine?" Rebecca broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Troy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "How long have you been planning to leave me for him?" Rebecca's head snapped up. "What? No. Troy, I would never." "Curtis is moving back to town, Rebecca. You think I'm stupid?" Her face crumpled. "It's not like that. I love you. I love our life. Curtis and I, what happened between us was a mistake, and it's over. A mistake that lasted how long? Just that week in Portland. It was just 1 week, and I regretted it immediately. I came home, and I chose you. I chose us." Troy stood up slowly. "You chose to lie to me for 7 years about my daughter's paternity. She is your daughter." Rebecca stood too, desperate. "In every way that matters, she's yours. You raised her. You love her. Stop." Troy's voice was deadly quiet. "Stop talking." Rebecca fell silent, tears streaming down her face. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," Troy said. "I've built my entire life around you and Emma. Everything I am, everything I've worked for was for my family. My family, Rebecca. And now I find out that my family is a lie. It's not a lie. Emma loves you. You're her father." "No," Troy said. "Curtis is her father. You made sure of that." He walked toward the stairs, then paused. "I'm going to ask you one more question. and how you answer will determine what happens next. Rebecca wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Okay, are you planning to tell Emma the truth? Are you and Curtis planning to be together? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Troy nodded slowly. I see. Troy, please. We can work through this. We could go to counseling. We can... No, Troy said. We can't. Because I don't forgive betrayal, Rebecca. Ever. And I don't forget. He climbed the stairs, leaving his wife sobbing in their living room. In his office, he opened his laptop and began making plans. Troy Hutchinson had learned a long time ago that the construction business wasn't just about building things. Sometimes it was about tearing them down completely and starting over. Sometimes demolition was the only honest work left to do. Chapter 4. The Foundation. Troy's demolition company, Hutchinson Heavy Industries, occupied a sprawling yard on the outskirts of town, surrounded by chain-link fence and filled with the kinds of machinery that could level a building in hours. He'd started the business 8 years ago with a single excavator and a willingness to work jobs that other contractors wouldn't touch. Now, standing in his office trailer at dawn, Troy studied the framed newspaper clipping on his wall. Local man builds empire from ashes, the headline read. The article detailed how Troy had bought his first piece of equipment with money from a lawsuit settlement, compensation for the childhood that had been stolen from him. His phone buzzed. Rebecca, Emma's asking for you. Please come home so we can talk. Troy deleted the message without responding. The truth was, Troy Hutchinson had been demolished before. At 12 years old, he'd watched his stepfather's fist destroy his mother's face for the last time. At 13, he'd testified in court against the man who'd called him son while breaking his ribs. At 14, he'd used the settlement money from the state to disappear into the foster system, choosing strangers over the mother who'd prioritized her boyfriend over her child's safety. He'd learned early that survival meant eliminating threats completely. Half measures got you hurt. A knock on his trailer door interrupted his thoughts. Miguel Santos, his foreman and closest friend, peered inside. Boss, you okay? You missed the Monday morning briefing. Miguel had worked for Troy for 6 years. He was one of the few people who knew about Troy's past, and one of the fewer who understood why Troy never forgave betrayal. Close the door, Troy said. Miguel stepped inside, his weathered face creased with concern. What's going on? Troy handed him Frank's letter. Miguel read it twice, his expression darkening with each word. Shit, boss. I'm sorry. I need your help with something. Miguel nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need. I want you to do some digging. Curtis Brennan. He's a lawyer, moved back from Portland. Find out everything. Where he's living, where he's working, who he's talking to. You want to follow him? I want you to learn him. His routines, his weaknesses, his secrets. Everything. Miguel was quiet for a moment. What about Rebecca? What about her? You gonna try to work things out? Troy met his friend's eyes. Miguel, if your wife had lied to you for 7 years about your kid's paternity and was planning to leave you for the real father, what would you do? Miguel's jaw tightened. I'd probably be in jail. Exactly. So I need to be smarter than that. Over the next week, Troy maintained a facade of normalcy while building his intelligence network. He went home each night, ate dinner with his family, helped Emma with homework, and slept in the guest room, ostensibly because of a work stress and insomnia that Rebecca didn't question too closely. Rebecca, meanwhile, grew increasingly nervous. She hovered around him, trying to gauge his mood, attempting casual conversations that felt forced and desperate. I've been thinking about marriage counseling, she said one evening as Troy helped Emma with the art project. Have you? Troy responded without looking up from Emma's drawing of their family. Stick figures holding hands in front of a house under a smiling sun. Dr. Kellerman has openings next week. She's supposed to be excellent with trust issues. Troy finally looked at her. Trust issues. Rebecca flinched at his tone. I just meant, I know I need to earn back your trust. I know it will take time. How much time do you think it should take? Troy asked. To forgive 7 years of lies. Emma looked up from her drawing. Are you and Mommy fighting? No, sweetheart, Troy said, his voice immediately softening. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. But Emma wasn't fooled. Her 6-year-old's intuition picked up on the tension that had been building in the house. Is it because of what Grandma said about the boys? Rebecca went rigid. Emma, honey, why don't you go watch TV? Daddy and I need to talk. Emma gathered her crayons reluctantly. I don't like it when you're sad, Daddy. After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with desperate eyes. She doesn't know anything. She's just confused about what Mom said. And what exactly did your mother say? I don't know. You know how Mom is. She says things that don't make sense when she's upset. Troy studied his wife's face. 7 years of marriage had taught him to read her tells. The way she touched her earring when she was nervous, the way her voice got higher when she was lying. Right now, she was doing both. Rebecca, I'm going to give you one chance to tell me the truth about what your mother knows and what you and Curtis have planned. Rebecca's face crumpled. There's nothing planned. Curtis and I haven't even talked since. Since when? Since he called last month to say he was moving back. Troy felt something cold settle in his stomach. He called you. It was just a courtesy call. He knew I still lived here, and he wanted it to avoid awkwardness. What kind of awkwardness? Rebecca was crying now. Troy, please. I know I screwed up, but Emma is your daughter in every way that matters. I don't want to be with Curtis. I want to be with you. Troy stood up slowly. The problem, Rebecca, is that I don't believe you, and I don't forgive liars. He left her sobbing at the kitchen table and went to his office, where he found 3 text messages from Miguel. Found his house, 414 Maple Street. Big place. He's working at Davidson and Associates. Started last week. Boss, you need to see this. He's got photos on his social media. Recent ones. Troy called Miguel immediately. What photos? Pictures of a little girl, boss. Blonde hair, looks about 6. Captions talk about my beautiful princess and can't wait to be together again. Troy's vision went red. Send me the links. 5 minutes later, Troy was staring at Curtis Brennan's Facebook page. The man looked exactly the same, tall, athletic, with the kind of easy smile that made people trust him. But it was the photos that made Troy's hands shake with rage. Emma. Curtis had been posting pictures of Emma, clearly taken from a distance. Emma at the playground. Emma walking out of school. Emma at the ice cream shop where Troy took her every Friday. Curtis had been watching his daughter. The captions were worse. Soon, princess. Daddy's coming home. My little girl is growing up so fast. Can't wait to make up for lost time. Home sweet home. Everything I've ever wanted is finally within reach. Troy's phone rang. Rebecca's number. Troy, where are you? Emma's asking for you. I'm at the office. Please come home. We need to talk about this like adults. Troy stared at the photos on his screen. Rebecca, does Curtis know where Emma goes to school? A long pause. What? Does he know her schedule? Her routines? Troy, you're scaring me. Why would he? Answer the question. I don't know. We haven't talked about Emma specifically. But you've talked. Another pause. Once. Just once since he called. Troy closed his eyes. When? Yesterday. He wanted to meet for coffee to clear the air. And I told him I couldn't. I told him I was married and happy, and that what happened between us was a mistake. What did he say? Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. He said mistakes could be corrected. Troy hung up and immediately called his lawyer, a bulldog named Patricia Wolf, who specialized in family law and didn't believe in mercy. Pat, I need to see you tonight. Emergency. And bring everything you know about parental rights, custody law, and restraining orders. Troy, what's happening? War, Troy said, and I intend to win. Chapter 5. Setting the Trap. Patricia Wolf's law office smelled like leather and ambition. At 55, she'd built a reputation as the most ruthless family attorney in the county, a woman who could dismantle a marriage settlement with surgical precision and sleep soundly afterward. This is a nightmare scenario, she said after Troy finished explaining the situation. Legally speaking, if Curtis is Emma's biological father and can prove it, he has rights. What kind of rights? Visitation, possibly shared custody, depending on how the court views his absence for the first 6 years of her life. Troy's jaw clenched. Even though he abandoned her, he can claim he didn't know she existed. Rebecca could back him up on that. Patricia leaned forward. Troy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you planning to hurt this man? No, Troy said. I'm planning to destroy him. Legally. Patricia relaxed slightly. Good. Because if you touch him, you lose everything. Emma, the house, your business, everything. Then we do this by the book. We'll need DNA evidence, documentation of his stalking behavior, and proof that any relationship between Curtis and Rebecca would be detrimental to Emma's well-being. Patricia pulled out a legal pad. I'll file for a restraining order based on the social media photos. That should buy us time. How much time? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But Troy, if Curtis is smart, and lawyers usually are, he'll counter with a paternity suit. Once that DNA test comes back positive, the game changes. Troy was quiet for a long moment. What if the DNA test never happens? What do you mean? What if Curtis disappears before he can file anything? Patricia's eyes narrowed. I can't be part of anything illegal. I'm not talking about illegal. I'm talking about giving Curtis a reason to leave town voluntarily. What kind of reason? Troy smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The kind of reason that makes staying more painful than leaving. The next morning, Troy put his plan into motion. First, he called Emma's school and had himself added as the only authorized pickup. Then he installed security cameras around his house and hired a private security firm to provide discreet protection. But the real work began with a phone call to an old friend. Danny Reeves answered on the first ring. Troy, you son of a bitch. How long's it been? 3 years. I need a favor. Danny had been Troy's cellmate during a brief stint in juvenile detention 15 years earlier. Now he ran a reputation management firm that specialized in making problems disappear from the internet. His methods weren't always legal, but they were always effective. What kind of favor? I need you to find everything there is to know about a lawyer named Curtis Brennan. And I mean everything. Credit history, employment records, medical records, traffic tickets, college transcripts, dating history, all of it. This going to cause me problems? Not if you're as good as you used to be. Danny laughed. I'm better. Give me 48 hours. While Danny worked his magic, Troy focused on the psychological warfare. He had Miguel begin following Curtis openly, close enough to be noticed, far enough to avoid harassment charges. The message was clear. You're being watched. Then Troy started showing up places where Curtis would see him. The coffee shop near Curtis's office. The gym where Curtis worked out. The grocery store Curtis frequented. Always polite, always distant, but always present. Curtis got the message by the 3rd day. I know what you're doing, Curtis said, cornering Troy in the parking lot outside the hardware store. Troy looked up from loading PVC pipe into his truck. And what am I doing? Intimidating me. Following me. I'm running my business and living my life, Troy said calmly. If our paths cross, that's just coincidence. Curtis stepped closer. I know you know about Emma. Emma's my daughter. No, Curtis said, his voice hardening. She's mine. And Rebecca and I are going to be together. Troy set down the pipe he was holding and turned to face Curtis fully. The two men were roughly the same height, but Troy had 40 pounds of muscle and a lifetime of control violence that showed in his posture. Are you threatening my family? Troy asked quietly. Curtis faltered slightly. I'm just saying, because if you're threatening my family, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just telling you how things are going to be. Troy smiled. Curtis, let me tell you how things are going to be. You're going to stay away from my wife, and you're going to stay away from my daughter. If you don't, I'm going to make your life very uncomfortable. You can't stop me from seeing my own child. Watch me. That evening, Danny called with his report. Your boy Curtis has some interesting secrets, Danny said. Want the highlights? All of it. He's got gambling debts. Big ones. Lost about 60 grand in Vegas 6 months ago to some very unfriendly people. He's been making payments, but he's behind. Troy's pulse quickened. How far behind? 3 months. And these aren't the kind of people who send polite reminder notices. What else? Medical records show he's been treated for anxiety and depression. Currently on medication. Had a breakdown in Portland last year after a client sued him for malpractice. The malpractice case settled out of court, but it cost him his job and most of his savings. He's basically broke, Troy. This move back home, it's not a choice. It's desperation. Troy absorbed this information. Anything else? One more thing. Your wife's Sister Miranda? She's been in contact with Curtis. Phone records show they've been talking regularly for the past 2 months. Troy felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. How regularly? 3-4 times a week. Long conversations. Send me everything, Troy said. And Danny, I need you to do one more thing. Name it. I need Curtis's Vegas creditors to know exactly where he is. Danny was quiet for a moment. Troy, those guys don't mess around. I'm not asking you to hurt him. I'm just asking you to share information. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, Troy said. I'm just evening the odds. After he hung up, Troy sat in his office, planning his next moves. Rebecca was playing a longer game than he'd realized, with Miranda as her ally and Curtis as her escape plan. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated him. Troy pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Rebecca's law firm. He'd only met her boss, Jonathan Davidson, a few times, but the man had struck him as someone who valued reputation above all else. Mr. Davidson? This is Troy Hutchinson, Rebecca's husband. I wonder if we could meet for coffee tomorrow. There's something you should know about your new associate. Troy hung up, then called Patricia. I need you to accelerate the restraining order filing, he said. And I need you to add Miranda to it. Miranda? On what grounds? Conspiracy to interfere with a marriage and facilitate stalking. Troy, that's a stretch. Pat, trust me. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll have all the evidence you need. The trap was set. Now all Troy had to do was wait for his enemies to walk into it. But first, he had one more phone call to make. Helen? It's Troy. We need to talk. Chapter 6, The Betrayer's Web. Helen's kitchen smelled like cigarettes and regret. She sat across from Troy at the same table where she'd served him Sunday dinners for 7 years, her hands shaking as she lit another menthol. You know, she said without preamble, I know everything. Helen took a long drag from her cigarette. Frank told you. Frank left me a letter before he died. He was a better man than any of you deserved. Tears started down Helen's weathered cheeks. He was. I killed him with the guilt, you know. The cancer might have taken his body, but I poisoned his soul. Tell me about Curtis. Helen stubbed out her cigarette and immediately lit another. Rebecca met him in law school. She was already engaged to you, but she was scared. Scared of what? Of settling down. Of becoming like me. Trapped in a small town with a man who worked with his hands while she had all these big dreams. Helen's voice was bitter. Curtis was everything she thought she wanted. Sophisticated. Ambitious. He made her feel special. So, she had an affair. 1 week. That's all it was supposed to be. She went to Portland to think about the engagement, and Curtis was there for some law conference. They spent the week together, and she came home pregnant. Troy felt his chest tighten. She knew it might not be mine. She hoped it was yours. She wanted it to be yours. But when Emma was born, Helen trailed off. When Emma was born, what? She looked like Curtis. Still does, if you know what to look for. Rebecca panicked. She made me promise never to tell. And I kept that promise because I thought it was for the best. For the best. Troy's voice was dangerously quiet. You loved that little girl from the moment she was born. You were a better father than Curtis ever could have been. Rebecca made the right choice. Rebecca made the choice to lie to me for 7 years. Helen met his eyes. Yes, she did. And I helped her do it. Why did you take Emma to the dump? Helen's face crumpled. Because Curtis is back, and Rebecca is losing her nerve. She's been talking about telling you the truth, about maybe trying to work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Shared custody. With Curtis as the father and you as the stepfather. Helen's voice broke. I thought if Emma understood how hard life could be without security, without a stable home, she might help Rebecca see reason. Troy stared at this woman who'd eaten at his table, accepted his gifts, called him son. You were trying to terrorize a 6-year-old to protect your daughter's lies. I was trying to protect my granddaughter, Helen said. And you, by helping Rebecca plan to leave me? Helen's eyes widened. What? No, Rebecca doesn't want to leave you. She wants to find a way to tell you the truth without losing everything. Helen, Curtis has been stalking Emma. He's been posting photos of her online, calling her his daughter. Rebecca's been talking to him behind my back. And your other daughter, Miranda, has been helping coordinate it all. Helen went pale. That's not. Rebecca wouldn't. Troy pulled out his phone and showed her Curtis's social media posts. Helen's hands shook as she scrolled through the images. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, what have we done? You've given me a war, Troy said. And now I'm going to win it. Helen looked up at him, fear evident in her eyes. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Rebecca and Curtis exactly what they want. And then I'm going to watch them destroy each other trying to get it. Helen grabbed his arm. Troy, please. Emma doesn't deserve to be in the middle of this. Troy gently removed her hand. You should have thought of that 7 years ago. That afternoon, Troy met with Jonathan Davidson at an upscale coffee shop downtown. Davidson was a distinguished man in his 60s who'd built his law firm's reputation on discretion and ethics. Mr. Hutchinson, what can I do for you? Troy slid a folder across the table. I wanted to give you a heads up about Curtis Brennan before this becomes public. Davidson opened the folder and began reading. His expression grew darker with each page. Copies of Curtis's gambling debts, the malpractice suit, his medical records, and most damning, printed screenshots of his social media posts featuring Emma. Jesus Christ, Davidson muttered. Is this legitimate? Everything. Curtis has been stalking my 6-year-old daughter and posting photos of her online, claiming she's his child. He's also been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. Davidson closed the folder. Mr. Hutchinson, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but this seems like a family matter. Mr. Davidson, Curtis is using your firm's resources to facilitate this stalking. He's been making personal calls on company time, using company computers to research my family, and representing himself to my daughter's school as a lawyer from your firm when he tried to get information about her schedule. Davidson's face went white. He what? He told the school's secretary he was representing a client in a custody case and needed to verify Emma's pickup schedule. She gave him the information because he said he was from Davidson and Associates. This was a lie, but Troy knew Davidson wouldn't verify it until after he'd acted on it. I want him gone, Davidson said. Today, I understand. I just wanted you to know before the restraining order becomes public and reporters start calling. Restraining order? Being filed this afternoon, along with a formal stalking complaint. Davidson stood up abruptly. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Curtis Brennan will no longer be associated with this firm. By 4 p.m., Curtis had been fired. By 5 p.m., Patricia had filed a restraining order. And by 6 p.m., Troy was home making dinner for Emma when Rebecca walked in, her face pale and shaken. We need to talk, she said. Emma's right here. Emma, go play in your room for a few minutes, Rebecca said, her voice strained. After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with tears in her eyes. Curtis was fired today. Was he? That's unfortunate. You did this. I protected my daughter from a stalker. Rebecca slammed her hand on the counter. Damn it, Troy. You're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything that wasn't already broken. Curtis is Emma's father. Troy stepped closer to his wife. No, Rebecca, I'm Emma's father. I've been her father for 6 years. Curtis is just the man who contributed genetic material. You can't just make this go away. Watch me. Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at it and her face went white. It's Curtis. Don't answer it. She answered anyway. Curtis. Troy could hear the panic in Curtis's voice through the phone. Becca, we need to talk. Someone's been giving information to my creditors. They know where I am. Rebecca looked at Troy with growing horror. What creditors? The Vegas people. They're here, Rebecca. They want their money, and they want it now. Rebecca ended the call and stared at Troy. You gave his location to loan sharks? I gave public information to interested parties. They could kill him. Then he should pay his debts. Rebecca backed away from him. I don't know who you are anymore. Troy smiled coldly. I'm exactly who I've always been, Rebecca. The only difference is now you get to see what happens to people who betray me. I want a divorce. No, Troy said calmly. You don't. Yes, I do. I want custody of Emma, and I want you out of our lives. Troy pulled out his phone and showed her a document. This is a petition for sole custody based on your unfitness as a mother. Mental instability, adultery, conspiracy to facilitate stalking, and child endangerment. Rebecca's face went white. You can't prove any of that. I can prove all of it. Your sister Miranda has been very helpful. Actually, phone records show she's been helping coordinate between you and Curtis for months. She's also been researching custody law and divorce attorneys on your behalf. Miranda wouldn't. Miranda's been recording your conversations, Rebecca. She's been building a case against me for months, documenting everything she thought would help you in a divorce. Unfortunately for you, those same recordings prove conspiracy and premeditation. Rebecca sank into a chair. This isn't happening. It's happening because you made it happen. You and Curtis and Miranda and your mother, you all decided to destroy my family. So now I'm going to destroy yours. Rebecca looked up at him with desperate eyes. What do you want? I want you to call Curtis and tell him it's over. I want you to cut all contact with him immediately. And I want you to convince Miranda to stay out of this. And if I do that, then we go to marriage counseling and we try to work this out like adults. What about Curtis? Troy's smile was sharp as a blade. Curtis is no longer your problem. Rebecca's phone rang again. This time it was Miranda. Don't answer it, Troy said. But Rebecca was already swiping to accept the call. Miranda? Miranda's voice was hysterical. Rebecca, someone broke in my office. They destroyed my computer, my files, everything. Rebecca looked at Troy with growing fear. Who would do that? I don't know, but whoever it was left a message. They said I should mind my own business and stop interfering in other people's marriages. Oh my God. Troy took the phone from Rebecca's hand. Hello, Miranda. Troy, what's going on? What's going on is that you've been conspiring against me for months. What's going on is that you've been recording my wife's private conversations. What's going on is that you're about to learn why smart people don't mess with my family. He hung up and handed the phone back to Rebecca. Now, Troy said calmly, let's discuss how this is going to work. Chapter 7, The Unraveling. Curtis Brennan was a broken man by Wednesday morning. Troy watched from across the street as Curtis loaded boxes into a battered Honda Civic, his movements frantic and desperate. The house Curtis had bought, the symbol of his triumphant return, now sported a for sale sign and a growing collection of legal notices taped to the front door. Troy's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Vegas boys found him at 3 a.m. No violence, just made their point clear. He's got 48 hours to come up with $60K or they start taking collateral. Troy smiled grimly. Curtis didn't have $60,000. Curtis barely had $600 after his legal fees and a deposit he'd lost on the house he could no longer afford. But the money wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Curtis had been so focused on his fantasy of playing house with Rebecca and Emma that he'd forgotten about the very real people who wanted to break his legs. Troy started his truck and drove to the office, where Patricia was waiting with a stack of legal documents. The restraining order was approved, she said without preamble. Curtis has to stay at least 500 feet away from you, Rebecca and Emma. He also can't contact any of you directly or through third parties. What about the custody petition? He can't file for paternity while the restraining order is active. But Troy, this is only temporary. Eventually, he'll be able to challenge it. He won't be around long enough to challenge anything. Patricia looked concerned. What does that mean? It means Curtis is about to discover that small-town life doesn't suit him after all. That afternoon, Troy drove to Emma's school for the parent-teacher conference he'd requested. Mrs. Peterson, Emma's first-grade teacher, was a kind woman in her 50s who genuinely cared about her students. Emma's been different this week, she said as they sat in the tiny plastic chairs. Quieter, more anxious. She keeps asking if you're going to come pick her up. There have been some changes at home, Troy said carefully. Nothing that affects Emma directly, but she's perceptive. Mr. Hutchinson, I need to tell you something. A man came by yesterday asking questions about Emma. He said he was a lawyer working on a custody case. Troy's blood chilled. What did you tell him? Nothing. We have strict policies about information sharing. But he seemed to know a lot about Emma already. Her schedule, her friends, her routines. Did he give you a name? Curtis Brennan. He said he was from Davidson and Associates. Troy pulled out his phone and showed Mrs. Peterson Curtis's photo. Is this him? Yes. Mr. Hutchinson, should I be concerned? He's not allowed on school property anymore. There's a restraining order in place. I'll have a copy sent to the office. Mrs. Peterson nodded gravely. Is Emma in danger? Troy considered the question. Curtis was desperate, broke, and facing violence from his creditors. Desperate people made bad decisions. I don't think so, but I'm taking precautions. That evening, Troy sat in his office reviewing the surveillance footage from his home security system. The cameras had captured several interesting visitors over the past week. Monday, Curtis driving slowly past the house 3 times. Tuesday, Miranda parking across the street for 2 hours, apparently waiting for Troy to leave. Wednesday, an unfamiliar car with Nevada plates, presumably Curtis's creditors. But Thursday's footage was the most revealing. Rebecca had left the house at 2 p.m., supposedly to run errands. Instead, she'd driven to a parking lot on the outskirts of town where she'd met Curtis for what appeared to be an intense conversation. The meeting lasted 30 minutes before Rebecca drove home alone. Curtis, meanwhile, had sat in his car for another hour, apparently making phone calls. Troy picked up his secure phone, the one Danny had given him years ago for conversations that needed to stay private. Danny, I need an update. Your boy Curtis is scrambling. He tried to borrow money from 3 different people today. No luck. What about his other options? That's where it gets interesting. Someone's been feeding him information about you. Financial records, business contracts, personal details. Troy's grip tightened on the phone. Who? Still working on that. But whoever it is has access to privileged information. Banking records, tax returns, even sealed court documents from your juvenile case. Troy felt a chill run down his spine. Only a few people had access to that level of personal information. Danny, I need you to check something for me. Has anyone been running background checks on me recently? Private investigators, law firms, that kind of thing. Give me 20 minutes. Troy hung up and walked to the kitchen, where Rebecca was helping Emma with her homework. They looked like the perfect family. Mother and daughter bent over a workbook, the evening light streaming through the windows. How was school today, sweetheart? Troy asked, kissing the top of Emma's head. Good. Mrs. Peterson said a man came to ask about me, but she didn't tell him anything because she doesn't talk to strangers. Rebecca went rigid. What man? Emma shrugged. I don't know. Some man. Troy met Rebecca's eyes across the table. She knew exactly what man. Emma, why don't you go watch TV for a few minutes? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. After Emma left, Rebecca turned to Troy with tears in her eyes. I didn't know he was going to the school, but you did know he was violating the restraining order when you met him today. Rebecca's face went white. How did you? I know everything, Rebecca. The question is, what else have you and Curtis been planning? Nothing. Troy, I swear, I told him it was over. I told him to leave town and never contact us again. And he said he couldn't leave. He said he owed money to dangerous people, and his only chance was to fight for custody of Emma. Troy felt something cold settle in his stomach. Custody of Emma for what? I don't know. He was talking crazy, saying he could get child support, or maybe he could get her away from here where it was safe. Safe from what? Rebecca was crying now. From you, Troy. He thinks you're going to hurt him. Troy's phone rang. Danny. Troy, you need to hear this. Someone's been digging into your background for 3 months. Deep digging. The kind that costs serious money. Who? A private investigation firm in Portland. Hired by a law firm called Miranda Castell, Ph.D., licensed clinical psychologist. The pieces clicked into place. Miranda wasn't just Rebecca's sister. She was a licensed psychologist who could testify about mental fitness in custody cases. She'd been building a psychological profile of Troy for months, documenting everything that could be used to paint him as unstable or dangerous. Danny, I need everything they found, and I need to know who else has access to it. Already on it. But Troy, there's more. The investigation firm also did a full workup on Emma. Medical records, school records, even genetic testing. Genetic testing? Someone submitted a hair sample 3 weeks ago. The results came back yesterday. Troy's vision tunneled. And Curtis Brennan is definitely Emma's biological father. Troy hung up and looked at Rebecca, who was watching him with growing terror. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Known what? How long have you known that Curtis had Emma's DNA tested? Rebecca broke down completely. I didn't know. Troy, I swear I didn't know. But Miranda knew. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Troy stood up slowly, his mind racing through the implications. Miranda had been orchestrating this entire situation for months. She'd hired investigators, arranged for DNA testing, and probably coached Curtis on how to build a custody case. More importantly, she'd been preparing to have Troy declared mentally unfit to care for Emma. Troy pulled out his phone and called Patricia. "Pat, I need an emergency hearing. Tomorrow, if possible." "What's the emergency?" "I'm about to be framed for threatening behavior. I need to get ahead of it." "Troy, what are you talking about?" "Miranda's been building a case against me for months. She's going to claim I'm unstable and dangerous, and she's got just enough evidence to make it stick." "What kind of evidence?" Troy looked at Rebecca, who was staring at him with something approaching terror. "The kind that makes a jury believe I'm capable of violence," Troy said. "And the worst part is they might be right." Chapter 8. The Hunters Become Prey. Friday morning brought Troy's first real crisis. He arrived at the office to find Miguel waiting with a grim expression and a legal document. "Boss, this came by courier an hour ago." Troy read the emergency custody petition filed by Curtis Brennan and co-signed by Dr. Miranda Castell. The document painted Troy as a violent, unstable man who posed a clear and present danger to Emma's well-being. It included expert psychological evaluation based on extensive observation and analysis of Troy's behavior patterns. The petition requested immediate temporary custody pending a full hearing, citing credible threats of violence and documented stalking behavior against Curtis. "They're moving fast," Patricia said when Troy called her. "Emergency hearing is set for Monday morning. We have 3 days to prepare a response." "What are our chances?" "Not good. Miranda's credentials give her testimony serious weight, and Curtis is playing the concerned biological father angle perfectly." Troy hung up and stared out his office window at the demolition site across the street. A crew was tearing down an old factory, reducing 50 years of someone's work to rubble in a matter of hours. Sometimes demolition was the only option. His secure phone buzzed. "Danny." "Troy, we've got problems. Curtis filed a police report this morning claiming you've been following him and making threats." "What kind of threats?" "He says you cornered him at a gas station yesterday and told him you'd bury him if he didn't leave town." Troy frowned. "I haven't been within a mile of Curtis since Monday." "I know, but he's got a witness." "Who?" "Rebecca." Troy felt the floor drop out from under him. "What?" "She gave a statement to police this morning. Says she's concerned about your mental state and your fixation on Curtis. Says you've been talking about eliminating threats and protecting what's yours in ways that frightened her." Troy closed his eyes. Rebecca had played him perfectly. While he'd been focused on Curtis, she'd been building a case against him with her sister's help. "Danny, I need you to check something. Has Rebecca been recording conversations at home?" "Give me an hour." Troy spent that hour thinking through everything Rebecca had said and done over the past week. Her attempts at reconciliation, her tears and apologies, her requests to talk about this like adults. All of it designed to get him to say something that could be used against him. His phone rang. "Emma's school. Mr. Hutchinson? This is Principal Martinez. I'm afraid we have a situation." Troy's blood turned to ice. "What kind of situation?" "Someone called in a bomb threat, specifically mentioning Emma. We've evacuated the building and called police, but given the restraining order situation, we thought you should know immediately." "Where's Emma?" "Safe. She's with me in the emergency staging area. But Mr. Hutchinson, the caller specifically mentioned you by name. They said you were dangerous and that Emma wasn't safe at home." Troy was already moving toward his truck. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." "Mr. Hutchinson, wait. The police want to speak with you when you arrive." Troy paused. "About what?" "They have some questions about the threats against Mr. Brennan." The trap was closing. Curtis and Rebecca had orchestrated this perfectly. A bomb threat to make Troy look unstable, followed by police questioning that would establish his presence at the school during a crisis. Troy called Patricia as he drove. "They're framing me." "For what?" "Everything. Bomb threats, stalking, mental instability. They want to make me look like a dangerous lunatic." "Troy, don't go to the school. If police are waiting to question you." "My daughter is there. Your daughter is safe." But if you walk into their trap, you'll lose her forever. Troy pulled over, his hands shaking with rage. What do you recommend? We go on the offensive. Immediately. How? By exposing what Curtis and Miranda have really been doing. And by proving that Rebecca has been lying about everything. Troy closed his eyes. Do it. Troy, this is going to get ugly. Really ugly. It's already ugly. That afternoon, Troy sat in Patricia's conference room as she laid out their counterattack. Danny had provided a wealth of information about Curtis's real activities, Miranda's unethical behavior, and Rebecca's coordination with both of them. Curtis has been using stolen credit cards to fund his investigation into your family, Patricia said. The private investigator he hired paid with a card belonging to one of his Portland clients. That's fraud. It gets better. Miranda has been secretly recording therapy sessions with Rebecca and using that information to build her case against you. That's a violation of professional ethics that could cost her license. And Rebecca? Patricia slid a folder across the table. Bank records show she's been funneling money to Curtis for months. Small amounts from her joint account, transferred to a PayPal account registered to a fake name. Troy reviewed the documents. How much? $12,000 over 6 months. Troy felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed him. She'd been systematically stealing from him to fund that betrayal. There's more, Patricia continued. The DNA test on Emma? Miranda arranged it by taking hair from Emma's brush during a sleepover at her house. No consent, no legal authority. That evidence is inadmissible. What about the bomb threat? Traced to a burner phone purchased with one of Curtis's stolen credit cards. We can prove he made the call. Troy looked up. You can prove all of this. Every bit of it. But Troy, if we use this information, we destroy all of them. Rebecca could face charges for theft and conspiracy. Miranda will lose her license and probably face criminal charges. Curtis is looking at multiple felonies. And Emma? Patricia's expression softened. Emma keeps the only father she's ever known. The man who raised her, protected her, and loved her unconditionally. Troy stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the first snow of winter was beginning to fall, covering the world in clean white. Do it, he said quietly. All of it. Troy turned back to Patricia. I told you at the beginning, I don't forgive betrayal. Ever. That evening, Troy sat in his empty house. Rebecca had taken Emma to her mother's for safety after the school incident. The silence was deafening. His phone rang. Miguel. Boss. Curtis's creditors found him again. This time, they weren't so polite. Is he alive? Barely. He's at the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. But Troy, he's talking, telling police everything about Rebecca and Miranda. Troy absorbed this information. He's trying to make a deal. Looks like it. Probably hoping cooperation will help with his legal problems. Let him talk. Everything he says just proves our case. Troy hung up and sat in his living room, surrounded by 7 years of memories. Photos of family vacations. Emma's artwork on the refrigerator. Rebecca's books on shelves. All of it built on lies. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Troy stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Yes, you did. You meant for all of it. Her response came immediately. Can we please just talk? For Emma's sake? Troy smiled grimly and typed. You'll have plenty of opportunity to talk. In court. Under oath. The next morning would bring the emergency custody hearing. But Troy was no longer worried about losing Emma. He was looking forward to watching his enemies destroy each other in their desperation to escape the trap they'd built for themselves. Because Troy Hutchinson had learned a long time ago that the best revenge wasn't violence or destruction. The best revenge was letting your enemies hang themselves with a rope they'd made for you. Chapter 9. The Final Demolition. Monday morning's courtroom was packed with more spectators than Troy had expected. Word of the case had leaked, and the local media smelled blood in the water. A story involving lawyers, psychologists, custody fraud, and financial crimes was too juicy to ignore. Judge Margaret Foster was a stern woman in her 60s known for her zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. She reviewed the emergency petition with obvious skepticism before looking up at Curtis's attorney. Mr. Bradley, Your client is requesting emergency custody of a child he's had no relationship with for 6 years. You'd better have exceptional evidence. Curtis's lawyer, a nervous young man clearly out of his depth, stood shakily. Your Honor, we have documented evidence that the current custodial father poses a clear and present danger to the child. Present your evidence. For the next hour, Curtis's team laid out their case. Miranda testified about Troy's concerning behavioral patterns and documented threats of violence. Rebecca, looking pale and shaken, described her growing fear of her husband's obsession with revenge. Curtis himself took the stand, his face still showing bruises from his encounter with his creditors. He painted himself as a concerned father, trying to protect his biological daughter from an unstable man. I never knew Emma existed until recently. Curtis lied smoothly. When I discovered I had a daughter, I tried to approach the situation carefully, but Mr. Hutchinson became increasingly hostile and threatening. Judge Foster listened without expression. When Curtis's team finished, she turned to Patricia. Ms. Wolfe, your response? Patricia stood with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Your Honor, this entire petition is based on fraud, theft, and perjury. I request permission to present evidence of criminal conspiracy. Objection. Bradley jumped up. This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial. Overruled, Judge Foster said coldly. If there's evidence of fraud in this petition, I want to hear it. Patricia's presentation was devastating. Phone records showing months of coordination between Curtis, Rebecca, and Miranda. Bank records proving Rebecca had stolen money to fund Curtis's investigation. DNA evidence obtained illegally without parental consent. Your Honor, Patricia said, this isn't a custody case. It's an elaborate fraud designed to extort money and custody rights through illegal means. She presented the evidence of Curtis's stolen credit cards, his fraudulent identity theft, and his manufacture of evidence against Troy. The bomb threat that supposedly demonstrated Mr. Hutchinson's instability, made from a phone purchased with stolen funds by Mr. Brennan himself. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Curtis went white, his lawyer looking frantically through papers as if hoping to find some overlooked defense. But Patricia wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'd like to call Emma Hutchinson to testify. She's 6 years old, Bradley protested. Old enough to answer simple questions about who she considers her father. Judge Foster nodded. I'll allow it, but keep it brief and age-appropriate. Emma took the stand wearing her favorite dress, the blue one with the flowers that Troy had bought her for her birthday. She looked tiny in the witness chair, but her voice was clear when she spoke. Emma, Patricia said gently, who is your daddy? Emma pointed at Troy without hesitation. That's my daddy. Has anyone else ever told you they were your daddy? Emma shook her head. No, daddy is daddy. Do you feel safe with your daddy? Yes, daddy protects me. He reads me stories and makes me pancakes and helps me with my homework. Patricia smiled. Thank you, Emma. Curtis's lawyer declined to cross-examine a 6-year-old, probably the smartest decision he'd made all day. Judge Foster called a brief recess, during which Troy watched Curtis arguing frantically with his lawyer. Rebecca sat alone, tears streaming down her face. Miranda had disappeared entirely. When court reconvened, Judge Foster's expression was thunderous. In 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to manipulate the legal system. Mr. Brennan, your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into the criminal activities outlined by Ms. Wolfe. She turned to Rebecca. Mrs. Hutchinson, you will surrender your passport and remain available for questioning by law enforcement. Finally, she looked at Curtis. Mr. Brennan, you are hereby permanently enjoined from any contact with Emma Hutchinson. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Curtis stood shakily. Your Honor, I have rights as the biological father. Mr. Brennan, Judge Foster cut him off. You forfeited those rights when you chose fraud over fatherhood. Biological connection does not override the best interests of the child, and this child's best interests clearly lie with a man who has raised and loved her for 6 years. The gavel fell with finality. Outside the courthouse, Troy found Rebecca waiting by his truck. Her face was streaked with tears, her designer suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. "Troy, please. We need to talk." "No, we don't. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. But Emma needs both her parents." Troy studied the woman he'd married 7 years ago. "Emma has a parent. She has me. What about us? What about our marriage?" "What marriage, Rebecca? The one built on lies? The one where you stole money to fund your boyfriend's investigation into me? That marriage." Rebecca sobbed. "I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can get through this." Troy shook his head. "No, we can't. Because I don't forgive betrayal, Rebecca. I told you that from the beginning. So, what happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices. The district attorney is filing charges for theft, conspiracy, and fraud. Miranda's going to lose her license and probably face jail time. Curtis is looking at federal charges for the credit card fraud. And me?" Troy opened his truck door. "You made your choice, Rebecca. You chose Curtis over me, lies over truth, and greed over family. Now you get to live with those choices." Rebecca grabbed his arm. "What about Emma? She needs her mother." Troy gently removed her hand. "Emma needs stability and truth. Two things you've never been able to provide." As Troy drove away, he saw Rebecca in his rearview mirror, standing alone in the courthouse parking lot, finally understanding the cost of her betrayal. That evening, Troy sat with Emma in their living room, helping her work on a puzzle. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if the lies had been a physical presence that was finally gone. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home?" Emma asked. Troy considered his answer carefully. "Mommy made some bad choices, sweetheart. She's going to have to go away for a while to think about what she did." "Are you sad?" Troy looked at his daughter, the little girl who had called him daddy from her first word, who ran to him when she was scared, who trusted him completely to keep her safe. "No, baby, I'm not sad. I'm just glad you're here with me." Emma smiled and placed another puzzle piece. "Me too, Daddy." 6 months later, Troy stood in the same courtroom for the final custody hearing. Rebecca was dressed in an orange jumpsuit, serving 18 months for theft and conspiracy. Curtis had fled the state to avoid federal charges, abandoning any pretense of caring about Emma. Miranda had lost her license and was facing her own criminal trial. Judge Foster reviewed the case one final time before making it official. Troy Hutchinson was granted sole legal and physical custody of Emma Hutchinson. "Mr. Hutchinson," the judge said, "this little girl is lucky to have you." Troy looked down at Emma, who was coloring quietly in the gallery. "No, Your Honor, I'm the lucky one." Because in the end, Troy had learned something his enemies never understood. The strongest foundations weren't built on blood or genetics or legal documents. They were built on love, truth, and the unshakable determination to protect what mattered most. And Troy Hutchinson had always been very, very good at protecting what was his. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.